Three countries, one trophy, one decision you have to make before you ever touch a flight. For the first time in the history of this tournament, the World Cup doesn't live in a country. It lives in three. The United States, Mexico, and Canada are splitting 104 matches across 16 cities over 39 days from June 11th to July 19th. Most fans pick their country the way they pick a seat on a bus. Follow the team, chase the big match, figure the rest out somewhere over the Atlantic. Nobody stops to ask the one question that actually determines whether their trip runs smoothly or slowly falls apart. Which of these three countries is genuinely easiest to be a fan in? Because the answer isn't what most people assume, and the gap between them is way bigger than anything that'll show up on a scoreboard. Let's start with the thing that decides everything before you even think about packing. Getting in. This is where a lot of people's World Cup dreams quietly die, so pay attention. There is no single World Cup visa, not one. Each country runs its own border, its own rules, its own backlog. Holding a ticket to the final doesn't get you through passport control. It never will. So your real first match is against an immigration system, and these three opponents are not the same difficulty. The United States is the strict one. If your passport is on the visa waiver list, you fill out an ESTA online for around $40, and you're done within days. If it's not, and a surprising number of people find this out at the worst possible moment, you're looking at a B visa, an in-person interview at a consulate, and a wait that can stretch into months. There's a priority scheduling system for ticket holders, which helps, but faster is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. Start this one early or genuinely don't bother. Canada is its own separate gate, and this is the trap that catches people off guard. A valid US entry does not carry you north. Flying into Toronto or Vancouver means you need a Canadian electronic travel authorization applied for online before you board. A completely different system from the American one, with its own portal and its own quiet way of humiliating people who assumed it would be automatic. Show up at the gate without it, and you're not getting on that plane. There is one exception. Cross into Canada by land from the US, and that authorization isn't required. File that away, because it matters more than it sounds. Then there's Mexico. Mexico is the open door. For dozens of nationalities, you walk in visa-free. No appointments, no interviews. And here's the part that reshapes your whole strategy. If you already hold a valid US, Canadian, UK, Japanese, or Schengen visa, Mexico will often wave you through on that document alone. The hardest visa to get can become the key that unlocks the easiest country. Smart fans build their whole trip around this. Less smart fans find out about it in a Facebook group 2 weeks before departure and spend an evening quietly regretting things. So on pure entry difficulty, the ranking runs almost backwards from what you'd expect. Mexico is easy, Canada is medium with a hidden catch. The US is hard, but it holds the prize. Now let's talk about what it actually feels like on the ground, because each country plays completely differently once you're inside. The United States is the giant. 78 matches, 11 host cities, every knockout game from the quarterfinals onward, including the final at MetLife Stadium outside New York on July 19th. That sounds like paradise until you open a map. These cities are not neighbors. Seattle to Miami is a 5-hour flight. Following your team through the American group stage almost always means domestic flights, rental cars, and a budget that bleeds quietly the whole way. And the summer heat is not joking around. Dallas, Houston, Kansas City, Atlanta, Miami, you will be sweating through your shirt before kickoff, and the humidity genuinely does not care about your feelings on the matter. Mexico is the heartbeat of this tournament. Only 3 cities, Mexico City, Guadalajara, and Monterrey, sitting close enough together that moving between them actually makes sense without requiring a small loan. The opening match lights up the Azteca on June 11th, and the atmosphere in that country is something the other two cannot manufacture no matter how many fan zones they set up. That said, Mexico hides 2 things nobody puts in the brochure. The first is altitude. Mexico City sits above 2,200 meters, and that thin air punishes both the players on the pitch and the fan who decided to jog for the Metro after a late winner in the 94th minute. Give yourself a day to adjust. The second is the season. June and July is the rainy stretch, and those afternoon skies open up fast. Millions of people live there year-round and manage just fine, but "I had no idea it rained this much" is a sentence you hear in every fan zone every summer from someone standing in wet socks. Pack a light rain jacket. Canada is the calm one. Two cities only, Toronto and Vancouver, and this is the first Men's World Cup the country has ever hosted. The whole place is treating it like something it waited a lifetime for and is determined not to mess up. Clean, safe, easy to move around inside each city, with locals so polite they'll apologize to you even when you bumped into them. The one thing the map hides, Toronto and Vancouver are over 3,000 kilometers apart. There is no quick hop between them. You pick one city, or you pay for a long flight and accept you've essentially taken two separate trips. Now let's talk money, because this is where the romantic version of your trip meets an actual receipt. Mexico is the cheapest place to exist during this tournament by a comfortable margin. Food, local transport, a bed for the night, all of it stretches further than anywhere else. You can eat genuinely well for the price of a stadium hot dog up north, which is either delightful or infuriating depending on your mood. Canada and the US sit in the same expensive tier but punish you differently. The US stacks the quiet tax of tipping on top of everything, plus those long domestic flights between cities. Canada keeps things more straightforward, but hotel prices in Toronto during match week will make you pause at the checkout screen and briefly consider your life choices. So here's where it lands. If you want the trophy, the final, the most matches, and the biggest stages, you go to the United States and pay for the privilege in dollars and border paperwork. If you want pure atmosphere, the lightest entry requirements, and the friendliest prices, Mexico is quietly the smartest play in this whole tournament. And if you want clean, safe, and genuinely uncomplicated, 2 or 3 unforgettable matches without any logistical chaos around them, Canada does that better than anyone, as long as you make peace with its geography. There's no single right answer. There's only the country that fits the kind of fan you actually are. But here's what nobody tells you until it's too late. The real test isn't picking one country. It's moving between them. The moment you try to chase your team from a match in Mexico to one in the States to one in Canada, you're navigating 3 different borders in 2 weeks, each with its own rules, its own documents, its own officer asking why your passport has stamps from all 3 countries in the span of 10 days. One wrong move at one crossing and your tournament ends on a plastic chair in an arrivals hall, explaining your itinerary to someone who has heard every version of this story before and is not particularly moved by